My name is Dennis Page. I work at Station 36 on B shift. I've been on the fire department since 1984. That's 32 years now. I live in Corsicana with my wife, who is a Dallas police officer, and I have 2 grown kids. I first realized that I had a problem in February of 2015. I woke up one morning and just out of the blue I had hip pain, my left hip, and it was pretty dramatic, and I did have a sensation. I felt a little different. I felt like something was different. I started to self-medicate this with Advil and ice packs and heating pads, and I started reading on the internet what it may be. It looked like it was bursitis from all the symptoms. So I made an appointment. After a while, it didn't go away. I went to the doctor. I didn't mention anything about my ideas about what it may be, but he came up with bursitis, and so it kind of confirmed it in my mind. And he was going to treat it with corticosteroid shots. So he gave me one, and the pain went away, but it only went away for a day and a half. And when it wore off, it was back to the same extreme pain. And again, I started taking Advil and using ice. I continued to go to work. I just kept ice on the spot on my hip continuously. The pain was so bad that I couldn't sleep. But given the advice of my doctor, I kept using the ice and taking the ibuprofen. Well, eventually, as time passed, I'd been to 3 appointments with him with the same symptoms, and they decided to give me an MRI. So I went that day and got an MRI. And it took a while for me to get back into the office for him to look at it, but when he did, he was very surprised at what he found, and I could tell by his reaction that it was something pretty bad. And he said, "I can't even explain this to you." He said, you just need to read it for yourself. So he gave me the document that the radiologist drew up, and it mentioned that there was a marrow replacing lesion, and it gave all the dimensions of it. And there was a bunch of other medicalese language that described what it was. And he looked very sad. He didn't look like there was anything good about this at all. So I kind of had a bad feeling about it. He referred me to a surgical oncologist, and when he walked in after reviewing all the medical documents, he had a frown on his face too. So I'm starting to see a trend here. It's not looking good. These doctors have already sized up the situation. They can tell that something very serious is going on. So he referred me. He said there's no surgery he can do. So he referred me to a medical oncologist who had a team at Baylor Hospital, and they started doing tests on me. They knew it didn't start at my hip, so they started testing my blood and doing CAT scans and bone scans, and they discovered that it was metastatic adenocarcinoma, and the primary site was the colon. And they could only tell this through the blood tests. But they also identified that there was a lesion on my liver. They located a couple of more metastases on my sternum and on my T1 and T3 transverse process on my spine. So when the doctor came in to describe, what was going on with me, again, I see the same face. It's very sad, very somber. But I felt compelled to ask about the prognosis. So he kind of looked down and shook his head a little, and he said, well, typically people diagnosed with this form of cancer and the stage that you're in, which is stage 4B, will live about 2.5 to 3 years. He said, but your age, relatively young, I was 53 at the time, and my general good health, I could maybe squeeze out 5 years. That's with the help of chemotherapy and pain management drugs. So they considered me like a terminal cancer case. So they started me out on some pretty powerful painkillers. I was taking morphine and Dilaudid, which managed the pain, but it caused other complications. Extreme tiredness from the narcotics and constipation. So the first round of therapy they wanted to do was chemotherapy. So I started on that pretty quick. Chemotherapy was very hardcore stuff. It's among the strongest chemotherapy that's available. It also comes with some very bad side effects, extreme fatigue, nausea. You lose your motivation to do anything. You have to make yourself do everything. And I continued with this treatment. I was responding well. After 3 or 4 months, they did some more scans, and they saw a great improvement. They saw shrinkage in the liver tumor. It had shrunk dramatically, and they were extremely surprised at the results because they didn't expect to see this, and they had never seen it in the past. So they decided to ramp things up. So they extended my chemotherapy. They pretty much changed the prognosis. Everything was looking so much better. They decided now we can do surgery. We're gonna take out part of your liver, and we're gonna take out part of your colon. Although they had never seen any colon cancer, they knew it was there from the blood test. So the first stage, I go and they do a colonoscopy. They're going to locate where the cancer is in my colon, and then I see a liver specialist, and he looks at a CAT scan, and he determines what part of my liver he's going to take out. And then these two surgeons are going to get together and perform the surgery at one time, 2 separate procedures in one sitting. But they didn't find any tumor in my colon, so that kind of changed the plan. They theorized that during previous colonoscopies that I had gotten, they had removed some polyps, and a cancer cell escaped into my bloodstream at that time and just propagated the rest of this cancer throughout my body. So I did have the liver procedure performed, and also the first 15 rounds of radiation I received were directed towards my hip, and that did relieve a lot of the pain, and it killed the cancer in my hip. So things are really looking good at this time. There was a bit more chemotherapy and then more radiation. This time it was directed at my sternum, and it also they did the radiation from the front, and the beam traveled through my body and attacked the cancer on my spine as well as on my sternum. And a little bit more time passed, more radiation. And then in December of 2016, I went in for what I thought was my last chemotherapy treatment. And my doctor came in and said he'd been reviewing my most recent scans, and he couldn't find any evidence of cancer. and he said he was astounded by it. It's just truly a miracle that I had escaped, the original prognosis. So how can this affect you? This type of cancer can be presumed to have been caused by exposure to combustibles. I've been on the department for 32 years. When I first came on, it was unheard of for someone to engage in overhaul activities and wear their mask. Nobody did this. There was a real gladiator mentality, and I think you were proving how tough you were by eating as much smoke as you could, showing everyone how tough you were. And the same pretty much went for car fires and dumpster fires. And I think these are the three biggest instances where you're going to get these carcinogens from plastics and other materials, modern materials, which are much more harmful and more likely to cause cancer. Flame retardant, which is sprayed on items these days, has 10 times more carcinogens than items that are not sprayed with it. Firefighters, according to NIOSH, which is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, firefighters as a whole, 68% of firefighters will get cancer during their lifetime. The general population only 22% will get cancer. So you can see that's more than 3 times greater for firefighters. And it's due to our exposure to these materials, which we can limit. This is something that we need to practice religiously, is protecting yourself from ingesting carcinogens. You're given a mask and you're encouraged to wear it, not only by the fire department, but by NFPA, NIOSH, and every other group that has any opinion on the matter. It's not safe to breathe these carcinogens, and the more exposure you have to them, the more likely you are to get some type of cancer. With regards to your personal protective equipment, it's important to keep it clean. Wearing your Nomex hood around your neck is not a good idea either. It gets a lot of carcinogens absorbed into it, and people will wear it around their neck while they're doing overhaul, or they'll pull it up over their nose to act as a filter when it's actually counterproductive to do that. That's the wrong thing to do. Keeping your stuff clean is extremely important. The cleaner it is, the better. We have a climate of wanting to look like you got half burned up in a fire by not keeping your stuff clean, and we need to get away from that and move towards things that are safe for you and for your family. Having cancer is both a physical and psychological battle. It affects not only you, but it affects your family, and probably your family more than yourself, because they have uncertainty. They have to look at you and wonder what they'll be dealing with in the future. I have cancer, and I'll be dealing with it for a good long time. It's uncertain whether it'll return. So this type of thing can be avoided. You just have to adhere to the safety practices and use good judgment